Darci, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate TNC and the Aspen Institute for the incredible work that you all are doing in terms of our forests. And I want you to know that we at the Forest Service look forward to reading the report and learning from it, but that we've already begun to address this very significant issue. We recently established a series of priority landscapes across a number of western states where the risk of fire is and has been the greatest. There are many causes and reasons for this, and we're trying to address all of them holistically. We have addressed 21 priority landscapes in which we are investing almost $1 billion over the course of the next several years, utilizing a variety of technologies and techniques to try to begin the process of better managing those forests, to reduce the risk of wildfire. We're excited about the opportunity to really focus on fire sheds that we have identified are at highest risk. We've identified within those 21 priority landscapes roughly 250 or so of these fire sheds, and we're beginning to address the 134 of them with this initial investment. And it's exciting. It's an opportunity for us not only to better manage these forests, but to reduce the risk to roughly 200 communities that are threatened by wildfire. It's also an opportunity for us to convert a lot of the wood that is going to be taken out to be able to protect old growth and mature trees and take out some of the underbrush and some of the hazardous fuel buildup and convert it into construction material. We're excited about the opportunity to see more and more high-rise buildings being constructed with cross-laminated timber, which can be taken from these forests as we do a better job. So I think we're going to find great consistency between what you and Aspen have basically suggested. It was a collaborative effort, and we're very, very excited about continuing to use the resources of the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act to be able to make an historic investment in our forests.
Well, it was, you've made a number of points that really highlight what the report found, right? Which is that there are opportunities for forest products to lean into that in a sustainable way. And certainly, you know, Greg noted for us in the introduction, we're in this together. So the health effects of wildfires, both the courageous firefighters who are facing more and more severe conditions, and then many of us in our communities who are breathing the smoke, the damages to infrastructure. We know that land after a forest fire is more likely to face landslides and fast water runoff, and so the effects of wildfires compound. So we all have a stake in this, not just those who live in the path of fires, and of course the fires themselves release significant greenhouse gases. But there are many mutual benefits if we do it right. And so that technology of how we use forest products, thinking about collaborating with the private sector around insurance and finance and developing that forest economy, and the multiple levels of government that have to participate. And I think one of the it was a real honor for us at the Nature Conservancy to be working with local, state, tribal, and federal government officials, including many of the talented people who work for you in the Forest Service, to come up with this approach. But equally important, and you mentioned this in your comments, as did Greg, are the people who live in those communities themselves and have to have a voice and a stake in the management of those forests. And so for me, as I look at the outcomes of this report, if we don't take the community approach, we probably won't get to a resilient outcome. And we can apply new technologies. We need to make sure we work on equity. We need to think about use prescribed fire and good fire and taking out some of that fuel, as you mentioned, that we can turn into products. But overall, that robust set of voices at the table is really the key to success. And so I do hope that many of you will take the time to it in full.
Well, when you mentioned community, part of what we were able to do with our effort was to do exactly what you all did, which is to reach out to the community first before we develop these priority landscapes, to ask for their input. We also have established a very close relationship with tribal entities that are basically very much interested in what happens in the forest. And frankly, when you do this collaborative effort, you not only have an opportunity for co-stewardship and co-management, which we're seeing more of with the tribes, but we also can learn. I mean, these folks understand and appreciate from indigenous knowledge. They know what needs to be done in the forest because they have lived there for literally centuries. And so the opportunity to learn and to incorporate that information into the way in which we manage the forest. You know, you also mentioned the importance of our firefighters. You know, as we take a look at this investment that we're making, we not only have to invest in better management of the forest, but we also have to invest in our firefighters. It should be shocking to everybody in this audience that at one point in time, we were paying firefighters $13 an hour to fight fires. In other words, they could make more money at a fast food restaurant than they could putting their life at risk every single day when they are fighting a fire. We also made many of these firefighters live in cars. I'm not exaggerating, this is the truth. There was not adequate housing. And so we are making an effort over the last several years to increase significantly the pay for these firefighters and to address not only the housing challenges that they have, but also mental health. It's a very stressful job, and we know that there can be consequences, especially if you lose a buddy in a fire, which often, unfortunately and tragically happens. So as we invest in these forests, we also have to invest in people. We also have to make sure that we invest in the communities that are at risk. The reality is that it's not just the Forest Service, it's also those communities that can use resources to become more fire ready. And so we have a community defense resource that we're providing and will be providing as a result of the infrastructure law that's going to give local governments and local communities the resources to be able to do a better job of protecting their own communities. And so when you combine that effort with the national effort and what's happening with so many nonprofit organizations and state governments, you're going to see, I think, a very concerted effort there.
That's excellent. And I think partly speaks to the vast array of things that USDA does and can impact in rural communities, from housing and preparedness and infrastructure, as well as forests and farming. But I'm going to pick up on a theme you had here, which was really supporting people who are closest to the land. And you have been a real champion lately for those small farmers, and noting that they don't currently, in many cases, make enough income from the land or from their current farming operation to really feed their families. They rely on non-farm income, they have difficulty getting by, and a more comprehensive approach to the way that they run their operations and value-added opportunities is necessary. So I wondered if we could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure, happy to talk about that. Let me put a finer point on the point that you just made. The last 2 years have been the best 2 years in farm income in the history of the country. And I've often said to audiences, normally when a Secretary of Agriculture can say that, he or she can leave the stage to great applause and can be finished for the day. But here's the reality of that number. 50%, nearly 50% of farmers that sell maybe less than $350,000 in sales each year, those folks did not make any money. In fact, they lost money during those record years. Another 40% or so of our farmers made money. They probably sold less than $1 million in product, maybe more than $350,000. They made money, but the majority of money that they made for their family came from off-farm income. So essentially what you have is, in a record year, 90% of our farmers either didn't make money or didn't make the majority of the money that they have to support their families from the farm, which means that 10% did very, very, very well. And of that 10%, roughly 4% or so are investment bankers who own real estate and own, they're not getting their fingernails dirty, I can tell you that. They are reaping the benefit of large-scale commercial operations. So I think the question that people in this country need to ask themselves is whether or not we're satisfied with that system. Whether it's, in essence, you either get big or you get out. It seems to me that we ought to have a better way, and a better way is to create multiple revenue streams and sources of income from that farmstead, regardless of the size. And I think the climate conversation that we're now having in this country offers a tremendous opportunity to do just that. We established, as you well know, because TNC is very much involved in this, a series of 141 projects where we're investing over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, roughly $3 billion. Those resources are going to help farmers embrace climate-smart practices in farms and ranches and forested areas. We're going to monitor, we're going to measure, we're going to quantify the environmental results of those practices. We'll learn what works and what doesn't work from those 141 projects. All 50 states are involved, every commodity group is involved, all sized operations are involved. And the reality is we expect and anticipate more than 60,000 farmers to participate, more than 25 million acres to be engaged in this. And we're linking those climate-smart practices with the commodities that will be raised to markets that would be willing to pay a premium for that commodity. So we have a value-added opportunity. Those farmers will also potentially be able to qualify for ecosystem service markets. There are roughly 24 of these markets out there today: water markets, carbon markets, biodiversity markets, et cetera. That's a revenue source that has not existed that now could exist for those small producers. Many of these projects involve conversion of agricultural waste and forest waste into something more valuable, a chemical, a material, a fabric, a fiber. Probably the best example is sustainable aviation fuel. As I often say to folks, I totally get electric cars, you know. When the battery wears out, you pull it to the side of the road, you get your cell phone out, get a charge, off you go. But what if you're in a plane and you're over a body of water and the battery wears out? Then what? The reality is we're going to need sustainable aviation fuel in the foreseeable future, and that can be bio-based. And that's a new revenue source, a new income source, a new job creator in rural places where you're converting something that has been a problem on many farms, an over-application, for example, in some cases, that impacts soil health and water quality, now becomes an ingredient in something, an emerging industry. So as we create these revenue sources, and I think agroforestry is one of those opportunities, which is the focus of the TNC-led effort. Tremendous set of partnerships between underserved producers, minority-serving institutions, large-scale corporations, big-time nonprofit organizations being led by TNC to essentially encourage agroforestry. And the benefits of this are multiple. We often don't reflect on the water conservation capacity of forests and trees. And if we maintain and manage our forests properly, it will help alleviate to a certain extent some of the challenges we have with scarcity of water or overabundance of water at certain points in time in parts of our country. So tremendous opportunity here to increase and to create not just two ways to make money at a farm where you sell a crop or sell livestock, but 5 or 6 or 7 profit centers. So if the commodity prices aren't great a particular year, maybe your ecosystem service credits are going well. If you can't get that corn sold, maybe you can get that corn stover basically sold to a processing facility down the road that's making sustainable aviation fuel. So the point of this is creating multiple ways for small and mid-sized producers. And this has a benefit, I think, also to rural communities because it helps to maintain population centers.
Absolutely, and the Climate Smart Commodity Program you referred to that the Nature Conservancy is leading, we are very excited by the fact that it does include underserved communities, that it's large and small operations, it's multiple regions, so you'll have different species of trees that we are asking farmers to incorporate into their production, which would have different value-added streams, if it's fruits or nuts or sustainable harvest of timber, a new income stream for those farmers. But that co-benefits that you describe, which those trees provide wildlife habitat, better water retention, wind breaks, protection from erosion, all of those should make their farming operations and the other crop production more resilient as well. So we're really interested in seeing that result. And the interesting part of this, of course, is that farmers who maybe grew row crops, who now are incorporating trees between fields or on the edge of their property, have to figure out where to take the products from those things. And so one of the things I find so interesting about climate smart commodities is that boost, that support, that community approach to then figuring out how many of those farmers have to adopt agroforestry before they can support a shelling plant for their pecans or their other nuts or the processing facility for their fruits, and how can we build a supply chain that works And it will probably take some tinkering, right? So this public-private partnership, this investment to help make markets that truly support that diversification and value-added markets is great. And you know, I think back to my experience growing up, and I look at this Climate Smart Commodities program and wish that we had it then. So I grew up on about a 280-acre organic farm in Nebraska in the 1970s, which is small for that part of the country, and there was just nobody else doing it. And so trying to find value-added opportunities to market our product, experimenting with different practices, we were sort of all alone trying to get it right, and to have these 141 different projects where everyone's trying to solve these same problems, and they're doing it in community. I mean, our neighbors thought we were nuts, right? And so, you know, why are you trying to do this thing that kind of goes against the grain? To have a community of farmers and then the processors, universities, all supporting that effort at the same time, I think is really powerful, not just for the investment, but for changing the culture toward how people look at their farming operations.
You know, one of the great things about the TNC project is not only linking and helping to create that market, as you say, but also creating a certification system. A critical component to this effort is the notion that we're going to monitor, we're going to measure, we're going to verify, we're going to report the results. That's why we have nearly 100 universities involved in these partnerships, because we want to learn what works and what doesn't work, because that's going to be a very good guide, a guide to allowing us to invest wisely the historic amount of resource that was invested by Congress and the President in the Inflation Reduction Act, an historic amount of money that's going to go into conservation. The question is, how do you direct it? Where do you use it? So it's going to be important for us to know what works and what doesn't work, and to have that capacity to certify so that people understand when they buy something that they understand and appreciate this was purchased or produced in a certain way. It's also going to be, I think, important for us to help build out that supply chain. And so in addition to the Climate Smart effort, we're also making a concerted effort in building out that local and regional food system, the ability to get those nuts and berries into a market and processed and packaged appropriately. So we are going to invest in what are called regional food business centers. There will be 6 of them around the country, and these centers will be physical locations where where we will staff individuals who will be knowledgeable about the 50 programs at USDA that support regional and local food systems. They'll provide the technical assistance and the financial assistance for those who are interested in, okay, now I've got 6 farmers that are doing this. How do we aggregate? How do we create a food hub? How do we create a little processing? Where do we get the resources for value-added processing? Well, those are resources that the government can provide, to your point about the public-private partnership. And if we can build that local and regional system, then we can link those berries and nuts to a school where we're trying to improve nutrition in school meals. We can link it to a food bank so that folks who are struggling a little bit have access. We can link it to a local grocery store or a local restaurant or any institutional purchaser. So now all of a sudden, those small and mid-sized producers have alternative markets where they're not dependent on a global market price that can be impacted and affected by anything, anytime, anywhere, but they have the ability to negotiate their own. So this is the exciting, dynamic opportunity that we have in transforming the agricultural economy, and forestry plays an incredibly important role. We're doing the same thing with forest products, trying to figure out how do we link them directly to the market. And I think there's real opportunity here.
Absolutely, and I love the idea of farmers thinking about producing for the globe, for the region, and for their neighbors. Not only, I think, does it help spread that diversification, the community support and understanding of their operation, but it's a huge risk management tool that, if prices in one place are lower, prices in another might be higher, helps them spread that risk around. I'm really intrigued by some of the data that we're seeing too, that a more diversified and more climate resilient operation also tends to have less risk to yield, and that we're seeing new papers coming out that farmers who have adopted more regenerative practices make fewer and smaller crop insurance claims. And so to start to build that cadre of data that says actually climate resilience is good for your bottom line, I think in the Climate Smart Commodities program, the collecting that data, sharing that data will continue to sort of build out that body of evidence and make it a little bit easier for farmers to get, hopefully, financial assistance to make that transition, that initial investment, and turn some of these experiments into a longer-term business model. So I think that that data connection, the diversity of markets, and the evidence we're building for that is really exciting.
Well, you're right. I mean, it can create a sort of a flipping experience where instead of spending a lot of money dealing with disaster, we have invested money that prevents the disaster. This is also true in forestry. The reality is we have, for far too long, one of the reasons we've not been able to manage our forest properly is because we took the money for management to put the fire out. And over time, more and more hazardous fuel buildup, larger and larger fires, more and more resources being sapped from the management side. The infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act allowed us to begin flipping the script here by being able to put sufficient resources into management. So hopefully over time, we begin to see a reduction in the cost of firefighting, which in turn can allow us to direct more resources in improving recreational opportunities, because the recreational economy is incredibly important, especially out west. An opportunity for us to do an even better job of the amenities, an opportunity for us to do a better job of management. So it does flip the script, for sure. And I think, to the extent that it creates an opportunity on the farming side for small and mid-sized producers, it also encourages more people, young people, to get into the business. I think there's a deep concern of the aging nature of the farming population in the United States. Who's going to farm, right? And I think there are an awful lot of young people. There are veterans, there are beginning farmers, there are farmers of color who are interested and excited about getting into the industry. But boy, it's tough. It's hard. Where's the land? So we're looking at that. We're trying to figure out ways in which we can provide the resources and creating micro loan programs and micro farm crop insurance programs, all designed to help that smaller producer get a foothold, gain some equity, and then be able to, over time, become a mid-sized operation. And then with multiple revenue sources, basically be comfortable not feeling the pressure to become bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right, to get bigger, get out, right? Which has been a lot of the pressure that farmers have felt in many parts of the country. And I think, as you were speaking, I was thinking about my grandmother, right, who would always say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And we've been in, that cure cycle, right, trying to fix the problem. And I haven't heard it put quite that way, that the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act and the investments that they're making, and really, I think, starting a conversation we haven't been having about investing in climate solutions and nature and communities as part of the prevention package, as sort of investments in resilience. We've really been talking about, I think, a green economy and climate and infrastructure in very new ways. And the way that you put that, I think, is particularly powerful, that preparedness.
This is an interesting point because, when you think about the climate conversation, it's always in the context of we haven't done what we needed to do, we're faced with a crisis, and we need to hurry up. But in a sense, it is also an opportunity to re-engage the country in a communal conversation,
Exactly.
Which I think we desperately need given the divisions within the country. We need to find ways in which we can find something common ground, and I think there is common ground when you talk about, well, let's spend money to prevent a problem that's going to cost us more money. That's something that can actually attract all sides to a conversation. And I think it's desperately needed. It also allows the United States to take not just an opportunity domestically, but also internationally. The reality is that as we've done climate smart agriculture and as we've invested these resources, we're getting attention from other parts of the world. They are very interested in asking, well, what are you doing over there? And in the past, it's always been a bit of, as you well know from your prior experience in the trade world, there's always been a bit of skepticism about the U.S.
Yeah.
In terms of the size and the commercialization of our agriculture. But now it's what are you doing? And how is it working? How would it work? Because I think they're beginning to see maybe this public-private partnership, maybe the government reducing the risk, reducing the cost of conversion to more regenerative practices, maybe that's the way to get more and more farmers as opposed to basically forcing a particular way to do. I mean, I don't think our farmers don't react particularly well to being forced to do something, but if you incent them and you show that there's a profit opportunity, they're more than happy to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and you're right that farmers everywhere are facing some of those same challenges. And I think you're also right that in terms of that investment, it's sometimes more attractive to be investing in your neighbor than to a government far away. So I think both of those things provide interesting pathways for the future.